Hello everyone. So problem solving is indeed the heart of mathematics. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to solve problems involving system of linear inequalities in two variables. So let's take a look at the problem. So Mr. Gutierrez wants fried chicken and tilapia for lunch with his friends and family on a Saturday afternoon. He finds that chicken sells at 160 pesos per kilogram and tilapia sells at 100 pesos per kilogram. How many kilograms of each can he buy if the total cost is not to exceed 800 pesos? Well, at first, kailangan mong matutunan is to translate the problem into your own understanding. Ano ba yung pagkakaintindi natin? So technically, si Mr. Gutierrez daw, gusto niya ng fried chicken and tilapia sa kanyang pananghalian with his friends and family on a Saturday afternoon. And then, nalaman niya, pagpunta niya sa palengke, for example, nalaman niya na yung presyo ng manok per kilo ay 160 pesos at ang presyo ng tilapia per kilo ay 100 pesos. So, ang tanong niya ngayon, ilang kilo ng bawat isa or ilang kilong manok, ilang kilong tilapia yung maaari niyang bilhin if the total cost ay hindi dapat lumagpas ng 800 pesos. Okay? So, we're gonna represent the two unknowns. First, we have X. So, we can represent the number of kilos of chicken as X. And we can also represent the number of kilograms of tilapia as Y. Because technically, ang tinatanong sa problem, no, ilang kilo daw yung mabibili niya, no? Basta hindi lalagpas ng 800 pesos yung gastos. Kasi 800 lang yung pera niya eh. Okay, so represent natin as X yung number of kilos of chicken and Y as the number of kilograms of tilapia. So now, let's formulate the inequality that we can get from the problem. So first, we have 160x. So it's like 160 kasi yung presyo per kilo. And then multiply natin kung ilang kilo ng chicken yung binili niya. So we have 160x. I-add natin yung 100y, which is yung amount or price per kilo ng tilapia. At i-multiply natin ilang kilo ng tilapia ba yung binili niya. So that is 100y. So imagine, let's say bumili siya ng 2 kilos of chicken. So, 160 per kilo. So, 160 times 2, 320. Pumili siya, for example, ng 4 kilos of tilapia. So, 100 times 4 is 400. So, 320 plus 400 is 720, which is hindi lumagpas ng 800. So, possible yun, no? Pero ang tanong natin, yun lang ba yung possible na answer? Okay? Now, translate natin itong phrase na ito. So, not to exceed. So, it's like, hindi dapat lumagpas. No? So, ang inequality symbol na gagamitin natin ay less than or equal to. Kasi kung hindi lalagpas, pwede namang 800 mismo, no? Magastos niya lahat. Basta hindi lalagpas ng 800. And therefore, meron tayong first linear inequality natin na 160x plus 100y is less than or equal to 800. But technically, no, kung babalikan natin, kapag ginrap natin to sa Cartesian plane, meron tayong mga values na mako-cover, no, na hindi dapat. Specifically, when we're talking about problem solving. That is why meron tayong mga assumptions dito. Ang first assumption natin is that we cannot buy a negative kilo of chicken. So, hindi ka naman pwede pumunta ng palengke, sabihin mo, pagbilan nga po ng negative 2 kilos of chicken, so hindi naman po pwedeng ganon. Hindi ka naman pwede pumunta ng palengke, sabihin mo, pagbilan nga po ng negative 5 kilos of tilapia. So, technically, ang assumption natin is that x must be greater than or equal to 0. Okay? That the number of kilograms of chicken must be greater than or equal to 0. So, possible kasi na hindi na lang siya bumili ng manok, puro tilapia na lang, no? Possible din naman na hindi na siya bumili ng tilapia, puro manok na lang. Possible yon. Depende sa kanya pagdating niya dun sa palengke or something like that. That's why meron tayong mga assumptions na binibigay. Another is that y must be greater than or equal to 0. So that's another thing na hindi ka naman pwede bumili ng negative kilos of tilapia. That is why the value of y must be greater than or equal to 0. So knowing this two assumptions together with our linear inequality. So, meron tayong system of linear inequalities. And using this system, we can now be able to find solutions to the problem and see kung ilan ba yung mga possible, no? Ano ba yung mga possible combinations na meron, okay, in terms of number of kilos of chicken, number of kilos of tilapia na mag-a-apply doon sa problem. So take a look at the next slide. So next thing is to graph the inequality 160x plus 100y is less than or equal to 800 sa ating Cartesian plane. So technically, yung pinakamadali no, is to solve for the x and y intercept of this. Or technically, we're gonna solve for the x and y intercept of the boundary line. So that means ang inequality symbol natin is like pinalitan muna natin ng equal sign kasi nga boundary line na equation ang hinahanap natin. So let's solve for the x-intercept and then we let y be equal to 0. Again, sa pagsusolve ng x-intercept, papalitan lang natin tong y na to ng 0 and then we're gonna solve for x. So 160x plus 100 times 0 is equal to 800. And so we have 160x is equal to 800 kasi x na to. 100 times 0 is 0. So meron lang tayong 160x equals 800. So we're gonna divide both sides by 160 to find x, and that gives us x is equal to 5. And therefore, our x-intercept for this is 5, 0. Okay? Now, let's solve for the y-intercept. We simply let x be equal to 0. So, substitute natin si x dito sa ating, okay? So, we have 160x, so 160 times 0 plus 100y is equal to 800. And so we have 100y is equal to 800. By dividing both sides by 100, para matira na lang si y, we get y is equal to 8. And therefore, our y-intercept is 0, 8. Meron na tayong x-intercept, meron na tayong y-intercept, so we can now graph the boundary line of this linear inequality. So sa Cartesian plane natin, something like this one. So technically, ang pinakita kong Cartesian plane dito ay nakafocus sa quadrant 1 because alam natin, ang assumption kasi natin, x must be greater than or equal to 0 and y must be greater than or equal to 0. So the values must lie on the quadrant 1, on quadrant 1. Okay? So plot natin ang ating x-intercept na 5, 0. So here, and then si 0, 8, ang ating y-intercept nandirito. And technically, we're going to use a solid line because of this inequality symbol na less than or equal to. Again, gagamit tayo ng solid because less than or equal to. Gagamit ko pa rin ng solid kapag greater than or equal to. Okay? So it means that all the points na dinaanan ng line ay part ng solution. So technically, si 50 at si 08 ay part din ng ating solution dito sa ating magiging linear, graph ng ating linear inequality. So, after graphing the boundary line, so gagamit tayo ngayon ng test point to determine saang portion tayo mag-shade. And in this case, ang pinakamabilis at prepared natin gamitin ay si 00 kasi hindi naman siya part ng line. Hindi siya tinamaan ng line. So, by substituting 0, 0 sa ating linear inequality, so 160 times 0 plus 100 times 0 is less than or equal to 800. And so we have 0 is less than or equal to 800. No? Simplify lang natin to, magsi-0 lang naman to. That's why we have 0 is less than or equal to 800. And then we have to ask ourselves, is this true or false? Well, technically 0 is less than 800, so technically this is true. So it means 0, 0 is part of the solution of the linear inequality at kailangan part siya ng shaded region. And so, ang ating shaded region must be dito sa part na yan. Ayan. Kitang-kita naman sa pointer na tinamaan ng shaded portion si 0, 0. Okay? Kasi nga, yung test point natin ay nag-true. Now, since sa ating assumption, x must be greater than or equal to 0, so it means, no, kitang-kita mo naman sa ating Cartesian plane, yung mga values ni x, no, so from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on and so forth, must be part of the solution. Kasi nga, x is greater than or equal to 0, so yung graph natin is like this. Ayan. Kitang-kita, no? So, ayan, that's the positive side. Next, graph naman natin si y is greater than or equal to 0. But technically, tulad na sinasabi ko, no? Kung imagine, kung meron kang x is greater than or equal to 0, so you can solve for the x-intercept din naman, no? To graph the boundary line. And then, makikita mo that this x is equal to 0. So, ito rin. And then, yung boundary line mo naman, no? just the vertical line kasi x equal to 0 is a vertical line. And then kung gagamit ka naman ng test point dito, kitang-kita mo naman na x is greater than or equal to 0. That is why yung shaded portion natin is to the right of 0. Okay? Kitang-kita. Kaya kalahati, no? Ito yung half plane na ginamit natin kay x is greater than or equal to 0. And for y is greater than or equal to 0, same process din, no? So we can simply plot the y is equal to 0 because that is our boundary line. And that is the horizontal line, no? Na makikita mo yung ating yung ating x-axis literally. So, ayun yung graph ni y is equal to 0. And then dahil greater than or equal to 0 siya, so upper portion, yung ating shaded portion. Yan. So, kitang-kita naman natin itong part na ito. Because y is greater than or equal to 0. Okay? So, next na gagawin natin ngayon is, ito, makikita naman natin itong shaded portion, no? Makikita nyo na 3 beses na shadean itong region na ito. So, it means na itong portion na ito ay part ng ating solution. Ayan. So, part ng ating solution to. So, all the points that lie here ay solution sa ating problem. So, technically, we can name some of the ordered pairs na matatagpuan natin dito. Let's say, pwedeng 3, 2. Ito, 3, 2, nasa loob ng ating shaded portion, no? So, dahil 3 yung ating linear inequality dito, so kailangan doon tayo mag-focus sa 3 beses na shadean. Okay? 3 beses nag-overlap. So, 3, 2 is part of the solution. So, it's like Mr. Gutierrez can buy 3 kilograms of chicken and 2 kilos of tilapia. So, po pwede rin namang 4-1. So, po pwedeng 4 kilos of chicken and 1 kilo of tilapia. At po pwede rin namang may butal, no? Po pwedeng 2.5 kilos of chicken and 3 kilos of tilapia. So, part pa rin yun ng ating solution. Okay? And marami pang iba. And just to show you na tama talaga yung ating answer, so we can substitute this sa ating inequality. And let me show you on the next slide. So, since nag-name tayo ng mga possible solutions natin like 3, 2, so palit natin sa ating linear inequality, makikita naman natin dito that here we have 680 is less than or equal to 800, which satisfies the inequality, and this makes the statement true. And therefore, we can say that Mr. Gutierrez can buy 3 kilos of chicken and 2 kilos of tilapia. So, kung 3 kilo ng chicken, 3 times 160, 480 yon. And then, 2 kilos of tilapia, 2 times 100, 200 yon. So, 480 plus 200 is 680. At pasok pa rin sa budget niya na 800. So, po pwede ito yung combination na bilhin niya. Kung meron naman tayong 4, 1, so po pwede, no, substitute din natin. So, technically, 160 times 4. So, that gives us 640. And then 100 times 1, that is 100. So, 640 plus 100 is 740, which is pasok pa rin sa budget niya, and that is true kasi hindi lumagpas ng 800. So, therefore, pwede siyang bumili ng 4 kilos of chicken and 1 kilo of tilapia. And for the last possible solution na ibinigay natin, 2.5 chicken, 2.5 kilos of chicken, and 3 kilos of tilapia, pasok pa rin naman dun sa ating answer. Okay, sa ating solution. Kasi makikita natin dito that 160 times 2.5 is 400, and then 100 times 3. Kung 3 kilos of tilapia yung binili niya, that's 300. So 400 plus 300 is 700, and that is still less than 800, no? So it means that is true. So po pwede siyang bumili ng 2.5 kilos of chicken and 3 kilos of tilapia. And that depends on Mr. Gutierrez pagdating niya dun sa palengke. Because these are just some of the possible solutions na po pwede niyang gawin. Na po pwede niyang bilhin dun sa palengke. So po pwede muna kasi, no, possible, dagdagan natin yung context ng problem, maaring tanungin niya muna yung prepared ng mga bisita niya sa bahay. Sino ba yung mahilig sa chicken? So technically, mas maraming chicken yung bibili niya. Sino ba mahilig sa tilapia? So kung gano'n, mas maraming tilapia yung bibili niya. As long as hindi dapat na magpas ng 800 pesos kasi yun lang yung budget niya. Okay? And that ends my lesson for this session. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something today. See you again next time.